Hi everybody, bonjour à toutes et à tous. I'll start with some quick housekeeping. So please note that this session is being recorded. And Riley from Canadian Evaluation Society has kindly joined us for the first few minutes to post information in the chat about how to access closed captioning, how to access the automatic translation into French. Because yes, we have French translation today, courtesy of the Canadian Evaluation Society. I'm Vanessa Anastasopoulos, the chair of the Independent Consulting Community of Interest, or ICCI, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the first of our two-part workshop entitled Proposal Power: Strategies for Success. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, the ICCI is a volunteer-led initiative aimed at providing mutual support and fostering community for those interested in or practicing independent evaluation consulting. So today's workshop is but one of many online events that we've hosted for our members since we started in the spring of 2023. All ICCI activities are carried out by volunteer steering committee members who, like me, are passionate about building a space in which we can all support each other through our evaluation consulting journeys. So to that end, I encourage you all to kick off this session with a little bit of networking by introducing yourselves to one another in the chat. So if you can write about who you are, where you are, at what stage of your independent consulting career you're in, or have you already started, or are you consulting curious, as I like to call it? Do you specialize in a particular kind of evaluation service? You can write about if you're open to subcontracting or looking for a subcontractor with specific expertise. If you want to connect with others, add your email address or LinkedIn address. And then both throughout the workshop and after, we encourage you to reach out to one another and chat. All right, I also have some great news to share. While the ICCI Steering Committee was on break for the summer, we learned that the Canadian Evaluation Society has decided to include the ICCI among its first official and permanent communities of interest. And importantly, they're providing much needed tech support, like the use of the Canadian Evaluation Society's Zoom account, which is how we're hosting this event today. So our sincere thanks go to the Canadian Evaluation Society's National Board for their invaluable support. I'll also mention quickly that ICCI's next event will be an online networking activity on November 19th entitled Surviving and Thriving with Difficult Clients. It's a networking event. So come prepared to share your innovative, fun, creative, and stress-reducing, yet still effective, tips for navigating difficult client situations. Okay, we sent the invite for this out yesterday, but it accidentally went out with the wrong URL. We corrected that this morning, but I'm going to, as soon as I stop talking, post that right URL in the chat so that you can all sign up and register today. And like all ICCI events, it is free for everybody who signs up. So without further ado, let's jump into our Proposal Power webinar. So we've got three speakers today, Gail Valence-Barrington, Claire Levin, and me. And I'm going to let each person introduce themselves. So I thought maybe, Gail, we could start with you, though I feel like you require no introduction because you are the quintessential speaker on independent consulting and evaluation. But if you could please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Vanessa. Well, it's one of my favorite topics. No problem. Anyway, I'm Gail Barrington. I was an independent consultant for 35 years, ran my own consulting business, Barrington Research Group, and learned so many lessons along the way that I'm still parsing through them and figuring out what they all meant. So I had the opportunity of writing a book on being an independent consultant. I also co-authored a textbook, which is an introductory textbook in evaluation and evaluation theory and practice, with a big focus on practice, lots of examples and case studies by other consultants. And most recently added a chapter to a book that's going to be a guidebook on evaluation. And we'll post that information at the end of the session. We'll give you some documents to take away. So I'm just happy to be involved. Vanessa and I worked together to set up the ICCI 3 years ago, starting with a breakfast at one of our conferences. And it's been going strong since then. So I really welcome you all, and it's great to see so many friends and colleagues here today.
Claire?
Thanks, Vanessa. Hello, everyone. It's great to read all the introductions that are being shared in the chat and seeing the representation from all the participants. So thank you for doing that. My name's Claire Lovin. I'm a partner at a small consulting firm in Halifax called Research Power Incorporated. I've been working as a consultant for 15 years and the last 5 as a partner and co-owner. The company itself has been around for about 20 years. We have a small team of 4 plus some subcontractors, and we work primarily with government agencies, and a few major national nonprofits. So that's kind of our main client base, and primarily in healthcare and other public service sectors as well, education and community services. So I have lots of experience writing proposals. I've probably written hundreds over my career so far, and looking forward to sharing our lessons learned, and also, encourage you folks to share your lessons learned as well, because I'm sure there's a lot of great expertise in the room too. So thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks. And so I'm coming to you today from Jojage. Montreal is the unceded territory of the Ganagahaga Nation, and also where a number of different peoples would gather and remain stewards of our lands today. So I have been an evaluator for over 25 years, but I've only been an independent consultant for the last 7 or 8 of those. And in that time, I've definitely written my fair share of proposals. But prior to that, in past roles, I was an internal evaluator. And so sometimes I was wearing the other hat of being the commissioner of evaluation projects, and so developing RFPs and selecting among the proposals that we receive. So I actually think it's quite enriching to be able to have both perspectives. And I think I'll stop there. So I'm a bilingual evaluator. If anybody else has other questions about me, please feel free to reach out here or by LinkedIn later. And let's, with that, jump right in. Oh, that's right. What are we going to talk about? So thanks for that prompt, Claire. Okay. So today's session is going to be about what types of contracting opportunities exist, how to find them, how to decide if you should submit a proposal for an opportunity, and how to think about how to start, I should say, thinking about what you might want to put in a proposal. And tomorrow, we're going to continue the conversation by diving deeper into the proposal development process. The slides that we're sharing and the links to all the resources that we're talking about are going to be shared. And we're also going to share a recording or post a recording of our sessions. Those recordings are going to be posted both on the CES website and on the ICCI YouTube page. And I'll post a link to that page in the chat as well in a moment. But with that, I think I will pass it over to Gail to talk about the marketing context.
Thanks, Vanessa. Well, this is like a preamble because this is not about proposals. But I just have to tell you that writing proposals is dreadful. It is so hard. It is so much work, and there is no guarantee that you're going to get the work. And so it's really tough. It's hard on you because, of course, if you're writing a proposal, you obviously want the project. And so you put your whole heart into it, but you have no control over what happens. So throughout my career, I agreed with a longtime consultant who said consulting is the most damnable business in the world. So I'll just start with that to give you some background. So why did I do it? Because it's so much fun, it's challenging, and I get bored easily. So it's always new and exciting. So you're always learning something, meeting new people, and there's just so many positive reasons. Writing proposals is not one of them. So before we get into how to do it, which you have to learn to do if you don't already, and I see that there are many well-seasoned evaluators online with us today, consider the informal options, which are so much easier. So the first one is networking, and it's a really great marketing tool because, in fact, you're going to be networking all the time, every day, as long as you're a consultant. So it becomes a kind of way of life. What you need to think about is, though, all the networks that intersect with your life, work colleagues, past and present, you've got project stakeholders, if you've done some evaluation work already, even for other people, the members of the evaluation community. We've got adjunct fields like academia and government and policy studies. And then there are your friends and relatives and neighbors. I once got a contract from the mother of a kid who went to the same daycare as my kid. So anything is possible. And overlapping types of intersectionality on a broader social and political context as well. Because of a particular affiliation you may have, it may be easier for you to get some kinds of projects. So here's some ideas about how to go about networking. Go to conferences with clients, their conferences. So for example, if they work in the area of aging, go with them to that and meet people there. Perhaps even prepare a joint presentation at that conference and get your profile up there. Join groups that have networking potential, such as volunteer boards or groups that share a hobby or an interest, like Toastmasters, for example. Be sure to attend all the CES conferences, local, national, provincial. And if you're able to attend more broadly conferences like the American Evaluation Association and the European Association. One of the good things about going to conferences is it keeps you new. I always viewed it to be my professional development, was attending these conferences, because this is how you learn the latest strategies and how you meet the theorists, and you're able to talk to them and discuss ideas in detail. It's a wonderful opportunity. And all of that knowledge then gets folded into your own proposal writing. And then to encourage you to volunteer for CES in many capacities, not the least of which is the ICCI, because you work alongside consultants, you get to know them, and the next thing you know, you're good friends. And there are many wonderful opportunities that lie ahead. Now, the second type of marketing that you can be doing, of course, is referrals. And referrals is perhaps the top one when consultants do surveys to ask, how do you market? What's the most effective way to market? A referral is something you have no control over, but there's a kind of magic to it. You can't plan for it, but what you can plan for is planting seeds. And the simplest strategy is a direct request by letting somebody know that a referral would be appreciated. When you leave a project, be sure to ask your client at the end of the project to refer your work to their colleagues, because there's nothing better than that type of a referral. and explain to them that that's how you get your work, is through referrals, and so you would really appreciate it. Then keep people apprised of your services. For example, supposing you take on this great project and through it you come up with some innovative approaches. Well, you should be sharing that information that you have, that you now incorporate the newest and latest. And for example, Vanessa is going to be talking about the use of AI to your services and how it can be of use to them. So always be letting them know when you're upgrading and developing new services. And always ask them to be sure to invite others to talk about your services and how available you are to go for coffee or whatever with anybody who's interested. Also, when you go to a business event or a social event, be sure to carry business cards and, always be willing to hand one out. And if you get one back, be sure to follow up within 24 hours. So the third type of marketing has to do with repeat business. And I really love repeat business because it's sitting there waiting for you to pick it up. There are all sorts of future opportunities. And in fact, my good colleagues at the American Evaluation Association did a survey and found out that 51% of new projects that independent consultants have, they got from existing clients. So repeat business speaks to the quality of your work. So always know that you're doing the best work now so that you can get more work later. Strategic alliances is another way to get business, and that's to work with other consultants. It's a great way to break into the market, and collaborating with other independent consultants is really instructive and informative. So working together, everybody contributes the best skills that they've got. And so, for example, you can tailor the team that you're offering on the proposal based on everybody's skills, some of which you do not personally have. So you can, look for larger, more complex projects as a result of that. Now, I also found working with other consultants that you can learn more about management processes, like how do they go about organizing a project? And so that can be instructive as well. And another thing is that you're reducing the competition because you are working with them on the project instead of two separate consultants competing with each other for the same work. It's able to you're able to optimize the budget because you have different skill levels, and so you can charge according to that. And at the end of the day, you have different perspectives. Sometimes being an independent consultant is very lonely, and you would love to have somebody to talk the project over with. So when you're collaborating, it's certainly possible. I also want to talk briefly about spin-offs, which is not mentioned very often, but a client often has more than one project on the go, more than one program that they're handling, and so it's possible to help them out in other projects as well. And you're handy, you're right there, and they know your work, and so they're stressed and in a hurry, perhaps you can always offer your services as well. And then they work with other organizations who may also need assistance. So I've had a lot of spin-off work over the years that's been very productive and lucrative. And finally, one quick comment on online. You all know about online marketing and so on, but make sure that you are searchable and that your online presence is available to everybody that you have. Don't forget to keep them up to date. Your emails and your LinkedIn links and other social media and so on. Get on the roster for the credentialed evaluators if you are one. Make sure you're on the chapter list for CES. And it's a good idea to get involved and post regularly on blogs and podcasts, other social media posts. Find a group that you associate with that suits you. And I have to stop talking very quickly. And then work to become a part of those social communities of thought by contributing your own perspective. Thank you.
That is great. Thank you, Gail. Um, I'm just wondering, I did something to my view screen and I don't see the presentation anymore. So I just want to make sure everybody else still sees it, right?
If you can't see the slides, just let us know in the chat. I see a lot of thumbs up, so I
Okay,
think we're
good.
good.
It's just me. I'll fiddle with that later. Thank you for the reassurance. Another thing I was wondering, I've been looking a little bit at all these great introductions that people are making in the chat. And I was thinking that it would be so great to be able to preserve this because you never know when sometime in the future you're thinking, oh, I really wish I knew somebody who has experience working with the World Bank or something like that. And so being able to save this somewhere might be interesting. Um, it's just a food for thought. If you can save the chat, please do so. I don't know if there's a techie way to do that. Just putting it out there. Okay, so I'm going to speak now about how independent consultants can find evaluation project opportunities. And I'm going to focus on requests for proposals mainly, but I'll also touch briefly on some other routes to being awarded a contract. In general, there are three types of solicitations that can lead to a contract. And how likely you are to get a contract out of them differs from one to the next. So let's start with competitions that are open to the public. That's when a client invites any and all interested contractors to bid on their opportunity. So they provide the information about their project, the timelines to bid, the eligibility criteria, etc., in the form of a request for proposal, RFP. And since anyone can submit a proposal in response, your likelihood to win is not as high as it might be with some of the other solicitation types. Although, sometimes the RFP can be so specific in terms of the selection criteria that your chances are increased. And of course, the better you are at proposal writing, the higher your chances are too. So then we have our next solicitation type, targeted competitions. In this case, typically a client will identify and invite about 3 contractors to bid in response to their RFP. And being 1 out of 3 gives you better odds. Another example of a targeted competition is that sometimes organizations will keep a list of evaluation consultants, like it's a roster that they have. And then when they have an RFP ready, they email it to everyone on that internal list of theirs. So this is still probably better odds than a competition open to the public. And then finally, we have the non-competitive or direct awards. So this, in my view, is the ideal scenario whereby the client comes directly to you and asks you to do a project without competing for the contract. In the federal government, non-competitive awards used to be referred to as sole sources, but they're increasingly now being called low-value awards because the contract has to be under a specific dollar value. I think it's about 40,000 in the federal government after taxes. And also the term sole source is reserved for times, it's a different type of contracting thing in the federal government when only one contractor has the required qualifications regardless of the dollar value. So non-competitive awards often still entail the client providing you with a statement of work that describes their project needs. And you're required to develop and submit a perhaps less formal proposal that demonstrates your qualifications to meet these needs and describe how you're going to do so. However, the level of effort required to win this type of opportunity tends to be considerably lower than others. I will mention though that though contracting is outside of the scope of our discussion today, because we're really focusing in on proposal writing, even if you aren't asked to prepare a proposal for a non-competitive opportunity, please still make sure to put in place a contract that outlines clearly what you'll do and by when. That's important for protecting yourself and having a clear understanding with the client about the scope of the project before you get started. Okay, what types of organizations use RFPs? So there's many, they're listed on the slide. There's government, so that's departments and agencies at municipal, provincial, and federal levels. Oh, Claire, sorry, I don't know because I can't see your slides, but I changed slides. Okay,
I'm with you, so all good.
perfect, thank you. So yes, governments use RFPs, so departments and agencies at municipal, provincial, and federal levels, as well as intergovernment organizations like the United Nations. We also have foundations that use RFPs, large nonprofit organizations, post-secondary institutions, and large private sector companies, though these tend to be rare in the field of evaluation, but we're seeing these opportunities present themselves more and more these days. So who doesn't use them? So usually it's smaller organizations because they haven't established their own solicitation requirements. Or it's clients who are already familiar with your work. So they come to you directly, maybe they're your past client. So that would be the non-competitive solicitation type that I mentioned in the previous slide. And now we're going to focus on the scenario where you're interested in finding RFPs that are open to the public so that you can bid on them. And I'm going to talk about where you can look for them. Next slide. If you're looking for government opportunities, check out, first of all, Canada Buys. That's for federal opportunities. There's also provincial and municipal procurement platforms, and each one has their own. And there's the United Nations Global Marketplace. So if you're interested in consulting for UN agencies. By the way, when we share the slides, we're going to include hyperlinks to all of these different locations where you can look for RFPs. Okay, so once you're in one of these government portals, you can do a keyword search to find the RFP that may be of interest to you. So for example, you can search by type of project, like keywords, program evaluation, impact assessment, performance measurement, monitoring, etc. You can search by sector, health and social services, science and technology, education, employment, international development. And of course, you can specify your geographic location. So is this Canada-wide? Is it just your province, just a certain region? And you can also set up an email notification to be alerted when new opportunities that meet your search criteria come up. So one warning that I'll put out there is that proposal preparation, Gail mentioned that it's not the most fun thing that we do as consultants, to say it mildly. But proposal preparation in response to government RFPs tends to be laborious. And I know that especially for federal evaluation opportunities to be true, but I think it also applies to other types of government. So personally, as an independent consultant who is an N of one, that's what I like to call myself because I don't have staff, I tend not to bid alone on government RFPs. It's just actually more work than I can take on, even if I could have the capacity to do the contract if I want it. I don't have the capacity to spend over a week putting together a proposal in the hopes that I might get it. If I'm doing that, I need to collaborate with others. Okay, that's me though. And I'm just sharing what I do. You do what works for you. Just a warning I'm putting out there. So it's good to know that some government structures let you pre-qualify for upcoming opportunities. For example, provinces and some federal departments have standing offers. They sometimes call them a vendor of record. As a pre-qualified contractor, you can be considered for an opportunity without having to compete for it from scratch, which is great. And these standing offers are typically for a defined period of time. So for the next 2 years or 5 years, you remain on the list. One thing to be aware of is that they usually include some kind of fixed pricing. So you don't get to set your own rates, and they come with other terms and conditions. You need to read the fine print. In addition, the federal government has 2 main procurement arrangements that evaluators tend to use. So the first of these is pro services, which is for low-value professional services with a maximum contract value of around $100,000. Though, for some independent consultants, $100,000 can actually be a large contract value. There's also TSPS, which stands for Task and Solutions Professional Services. And this is for higher dollar value contracts and for broader or more complex professional services. So these 2 federal procurement arrangements are not like standing offers or vendors of record, in the sense that getting onto pro services or TSPS lets you be eligible to sell professional services to the federal government more easily. But you still have to prepare and submit those laborious government bids. Having said that, and I'll speak just for myself, I did register for pro services, even though I'm an N of 1. And every now and then I receive by email a request for information asking me to indicate if I meet the required qualifications for a particular project. And if I do, then that may position me well for a targeted or non-competitive award if it's small value. There are a wider variety of places where you can find RFPs issued by nonprofit organizations, foundations, academic institutions, and industry. So you'll see on the slide a few of these examples. The Canadian Evaluation Society's newsletter, which is emailed to all CES members every Wednesday, includes a section called Jobs, Contracts, and Collaborations that lists non-competitive that's not true. that lists opportunities that you can bid on, actually. So competitive solicitations usually. You can also search and get email notifications from the American Evaluation Association's Career Center. And then there's Charity Village, which is a great website where you can find opportunities with not-for-profit organizations, charities, and community organizations. Though I have noticed that it is less popular in Quebec. Not as many French postings in general, I think. Sometimes organizations will post their contract opportunities on LinkedIn, so you can keep an eye out for that. Or just like with their job postings, organizations will sometimes post their RFPs on their own websites. If you don't know which organizations to look at, one tip is to search through past postings of inside an RFP portal like Charity Village to see which organizations have a history of issuing contracts in areas of interest to you, and then you can monitor their websites. There are also online portals that conduct aggregate RSP searches for you, mainly across government platforms, but also not-for-profit organizations, academic institutions, and other. And I should mention here that I have not used these myself. However, I have looked at them and seen that some online search engines have free versions, which can help you get a feel for their capabilities. But my cursory review suggests that you would probably want to pay for the full functionality of a subscription if you plan to incorporate this into your RFP search strategy. So often searching for RFPs is free, but accessing them and bidding on them will cost you $30 to $50 per RFP. And Claire mentioned to me earlier that in some cases, these aggregate RFP search portals will search through government RFPs and charge you to access them. But as we just discussed, like government RFPs are usually posted on their sites and are free to search and retrieve. About a year and a half ago, at the ICCI's first official event, which was on navigating AI for independent consultants, one of our panelists was Ted Wicker from Catalyst. So he spoke about how his firm has built its own custom AI GPT or app that, among other things, looks for those RFP opportunities that are of most interest to the work of their evaluation firm. So they built this GPT that goes out, looks for, does the search for them, and then feeds them back the results, I think, on a daily basis. As independent consultants, building your own custom GPT may be beyond the realm of what we have the capacity to do. I'm mentioning this here, though, because there are some who say that this is the way of the future. And I did find one paid AI service that seems to do this customizable searching for you. So it's called Publicus. I have not used it. I'd be interested to know if anyone here has had experiences with this or with a similar AI-driven RFP search service. So if you have, please do put that. Tell us about your experience in the chat. Okay, it's time for me to pass them. Is it time? Yes, it is time, I think. Just checking the time. It is time for me to pass the torch on to Claire. But I'm going to post in the chat now info on how you can access the recordings of ICCI's Navigating AI webinar, which is also how you can access all of ICCI's past recordings. It'll be the same link as I posted above. And I'm also going to paste a link to Catalyst's blog, where you can read their latest insights about threats to consulting firms posed by AI. So with that, Claire, I pass it on to you.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. So Vanessa's given a great overview of where you can find RFP opportunities and proposal opportunities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the decision about whether or not to proceed with a proposal. So once you've received an RFP or a statement of work and you're trying to decide, should you go ahead with a bid or not? Vanessa was sharing with me earlier that when she was just starting out, some of the advice given to her was to kind of go for everything and say yes to everything. And that can certainly be a strategy, especially if you're new. But as you get further into your career and your journey as an independent consultant, then you probably need to be picking and choosing what you respond to a little bit more.
Claire, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I see that Ellie has her hand raised. Ellie, I just wanted to let you know and to let everybody know, my apologies, I should have said this earlier, that we will have a question and answer period at the end of our presentation. And so please do stick around for that. You can also post your question or comment right away in the chat. And if it's a technical issue, please post it in the chat too. I'll try to sort that out with you over there. Sorry, Claire, please go on.
That's okay. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm just going to talk about some of the factors that we think about, and I'll show you another tool as well that people can use for deciding about whether or not to proceed. So one of the first things we look at is capacity. So the first capacity piece is, do we actually have the capacity to do the project, as it's outlined in the RFP or SOW document? And if you don't, it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily go ahead, but maybe you need to find a partner, maybe you need to engage a subcontractor that would come on board with you to do the work. So this is where those strategic alliances that Gail was talking about at the beginning really come into play, because they can help you with, potentially bidding on more things. The other piece of capacity is, do you actually have time to write the proposal? Especially as both Vanessa and Gail have said, some proposals are quite time consuming to complete and can be fairly complex. And so if you have, a team that you can work with, or thinking about what your workload looks like and what the timeline is for completing the proposal, sometimes the turnaround times are very tight. So that's a realistic consideration. Sometimes you just literally don't have time to actually write the proposal right at that moment. And so you have to say no for that reason. Another key factor is around interest and project fit with you or your company. So, are your team excited about the project? Are you interested in doing it? If not, maybe it's not your favorite thing to do. You may still want to go ahead with a bid, just depending on what your workload looks like. But especially if you're quite busy already, then if it's not something you really want to do, there's no point in proceeding with a proposal. Also, of course, thinking about the fit with your expertise. Do you have the right areas of expertise? Could you, again, partner or subcontract or bring in a subject matter expert, especially if you're just one person or very small practice? That is something that can be really effective in terms of a good fit with your expertise. And then, of course, thinking about, does it align with your values or your company's values, and the types of work that you want to be advancing, or how you want to work, those kinds of things. So those can be yes, no decision points as well. Another area to think about is client side factors. So do you know the client? Have you worked with them before? If so, was it a positive experience? If not, if you had challenges, is that something that you want to revisit and go back to? Maybe there was a particular person involved and they're not anymore. Negative past experience doesn't necessarily mean you say no, but you might be a lot more hesitant or reluctant to proceed if you haven't had a good experience with the client in the past, or if you don't know them very well and don't necessarily know kind of what they're all about. Sometimes you can find information about a client either through your own contacts or your network, or through just the proposal itself, the background information, or sorry, the RFP itself, the background information that's given. And of course, you can ask, usually there's a mechanism to ask questions and follow up if you want more information about certain things. If it is somebody that's a current client, another factor is, do you want to kind of give up the work? So sometimes, even if you're quite busy, but say a longstanding client comes to you and says, can you do X, Y, Z? Please submit a proposal for this. That might be something that you want to say yes to because you have a long history with the client. You don't want that work to go to somebody else. So another consideration is the budget and timeline for the work. So one thing that's been a big factor for us is a budget provided? And quite frankly, if there's no budget and the client is not willing to provide the budget or very clear scope parameters, then we likely pass on that and don't bid, because it's very difficult to submit a high quality proposal that really, describes how you would approach a project and what you would do if no budget is provided. So sometimes even if the budget is not in the RFP or statement of work document, you can ask and the client will share it. In Nova Scotia, our provincial government has a process where you can test the budget. So you can ask up to 3 times, is this amount within the budget? And they will tell you yes or no, it is within the budget. So even if they don't tell you directly the budget, they will give you a clue about the budget. So sometimes those kinds of things, you can kind of get a sense of what the budget will be. Second thing to consider from a budget perspective is the budget reasonable for what the client wants? Is somebody coming to you with a request for, all these focus groups and interviews and data analysis, and their budget is $5,000, right? So is it in line with that? And we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, because that's really the first thing that you want to do when you start the actual proposal writing process. You also need to consider any like personal or company expectations that you have for budget. So maybe, again, at a certain point in your career, you decide, well, I'm only taking projects that are at least $10,000 or at least 50,000 or whatever it is that you may want to set as a threshold. That can be helpful. And then, of course, looking at the timeline. Is the timeline, again, for the scope of the work that's described, is the timeline feasible? Is it very tight? Is it so tight that it's completely unrealistic? These are things that, you might want to think about. And again, sometimes there's flexibility in a timeline. So it's always good to go back to the potential client and say, here are my questions. I'm wondering about the timeline. Can this or that be adjusted? So that's really helpful to ask. And it may not be a complete it can be a red flag in terms of the client understanding of the scope, but especially within government, sometimes these timelines, come down from on high. And then once the work is awarded, there is some flexibility to change the timeline. Now, you can't necessarily count on that or guarantee it, but often there can be some flexibility after the contract is awarded as well. And then the other thing from a timeline point of view is, again, you see this often with government, is that sort of like March Madness, where people are calling you up at the end of February, beginning of March, and going, oh my gosh, we have to spend this money before the fiscal year ends. Can you submit a proposal for X? And again, that's just a question of your capacity and whether the timeline is reasonable for you to do the work. Another factor to think about is the quality of the RFP. So does it seem like the client knows what they want? Is the scope of the work clearly described in the RFP? If not, again, that's not necessarily a no, but can you go back to the potential client with some questions? And just a note about questions is usually for any kind of public procurement process, or even if it's like a limited competition being sent to 3 vendors, there's usually a process for asking questions. So a certain person is designated as the contact. You send your questions to that person, and then it's usually a procurement person, and they talk to the client department or whatever and find out and get you the answers. So, and then you also typically get the answers to questions that any other potential bidder has asked as well. So reviewing the questions and answers that might come through an amendment or something like that, that's really important as well. And you may not have full information to proceed with your proposal until that process is finished. Usually there's a deadline date for questions. And then the final thing is around additional opportunities. So again, is this something that could lead to more opportunities? So I was mentioning before the idea of like a threshold. Well, I don't take projects under $5,000 or whatever it might be, but maybe you will if it's like you're going to facilitate a small meeting and then it's going to lead to a bigger evaluation project, or you're going to help a client, submit a proposal for a bigger piece of work, and then you are going to be the evaluator and you'll get work out of that. So thinking about, does it lead to other opportunities for you or your company? So those are some of the factors that we think about. I do want to share another tool that was developed by a woman named Kathleen Sullivan of Fine Gauge Strategy. She is a consultant in the US, and sorry, just bear with me a moment. So let me put this up here. So this is an older version of her tool. It goes back to 2023. I'll add the link to the chat afterwards that has the link to her website where you can find probably a more updated version of this tool. And there was also a webinar that the Independent Consulting Topical Interest Group from the American Evaluation Association, where Kathleen talked all about this decision matrix. So this is a tool that you could look at as well. And in here, she actually, has this process where she's actually scoring and kind of using that numerical process to come up with an overall score. And I'm not going to walk through this in detail, but I did just want to highlight a couple other things in this section. So availability of a pre-bid discussion with the buyer. So again, this would be like, the process for asking questions, or maybe sometimes, especially for bigger projects, there's like a webinar you can go to or some other type of information opportunity. So that's really helpful to take advantage of. This one is really key. So is this a genuine solicitation? And most of us that have been consultants for a long time, we've been on both ends of this probably, where you receive an RFP or an SOW and you go, I think this is written with somebody specific in mind, right? So I'm just being asked as one of three because I have to be, but the client probably knows kind of already who they want to work with. Now, we've been on, again, both sides of that, both the beneficiaries of that and also the kind of extra bids for that. So that's just a judgment call that you have to make. And sometimes if you really have that strong sense that it's been kind of designed for someone else, then you make the decision not to proceed. Thinking about the number of additional competitors bidding. So Vanessa talked about like limited competition versus an open public competition. So if you know you're one of three versus one of 50 or however many bids they might get, then that's a higher chance of winning usually. So that's something to think about. And then the last one I'll highlight here, and this yellow highlighting I added, but is kind of like the cost of the time and effort to do the RFP worth the potential gain. And I'm probably the odd person out because I actually enjoy writing proposals as long as I don't have to write too many at once, but it's kind of a creative process. And so I kind of enjoy that part of it. But they do take time to write. So really thinking about like, is the trade-off, worth it to you, the time involved. So that's the tool that Kathleen has. And at the end, you can put in your numbers, you get a total score, and she's got some, proposed ratings there. So again, I'll add the link to the chat so you can take a look at that in more detail. And the final thing I just wanted to mention was around contract requirements. So often, again, for government, other public vendors, the kind of draft contract will be part of the RFP document. And sometimes people will look at that and go, oh, well, I don't have that liability insurance, or I don't have that, WCB coverage or whatever it might be. We're not going to get into a big, discussion right now about insurance, although it's very important that you have it. But the main thing I wanted to say is that if you are awarded the work, often those requirements can be negotiated if you have a valid reason for why. Like typically with government, they're using like a boilerplate contract, which may be applicable to projects that are much bigger than, say, the $30,000 project that you're going to do with them. And so the insurance needs, et cetera, might not be relevant to you. So that can all usually be negotiated. And then I just wanted to briefly touch on AI, and I think I saw a question fly by about this in the chat. We are going to be talking about AI kind of throughout this presentation, and I'll share a link to another webinar that was done recently, again, in the American Evaluation Association Independent Consultants Group, where they talked all about using AI to help with the proposal rating process. And I think we just want to highlight some kind of key considerations. So, of course, it's optional whether you choose to use AI or not, and you want to be aware of the risks and benefits and the ethical considerations around using it. We want to avoid any prompts that might unintentionally, plagiarize the work of other people. You need to have a good understanding of what happens to your data. whether you're using, a paid version versus a free version, and how data privacy is handled. And generally don't want to put any identifiable information into a tool where you might not have that privacy guarantee. So that's all I want to say. We're not here just to talk about AI, so that's all I'll say about that. But I did put a couple of prompts on the slide here that you can use, and Vanessa's going to talk more about this tomorrow. And you can use an AI tool with the RFP document to help you think about, identify what the criteria are, and think about whether or not you want to bid. If you build a little bit of like a proposal assistant that knows you and your company and, your expertise, it can help answer some of these questions. So with that, I will wrap up and pass it over to Gail.
Thank you. Can you just tell me how much time we have left?
You have, Gail, I believe 15 minutes.
Okay. I don't think I'll take that much, but I'm going to share the screen.
Okay, sorry. I had that one slide up if you wanted to speak to it, but I can stop.
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, there's basically two types of proposals. One of them is an informal one. It's like a letter that you write to your potential client and you lay out what you propose to do in the work. And these are less stressful, of course, and they're usually aimed at smaller sized projects. And so an informal letter of quotation may be all that you need. On the other hand, there are also formal proposals based on an RFP, request for proposal. And so for them, you need a lot more information. So I've just got a quick template for both of these. I wonder, can we put the link or the document in the chat?
Yep, I'll add that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to just share the document so we can run through it quickly. And so now this is just a template, and you can use this any way you want. But I think the main point I want to make is that you need to be following these topics, but not necessarily in this order. In fact, what you need to do is follow directions very, very closely. Because one of the things that happens is that when the client gets a pile of proposals on their desk, they tend to only look at the ones that have actually followed the directions to the letter. And I have heard from members of the federal government that up to 90% of the proposals they receive, they never look at. Now, this was horrifying to me, but other people have confirmed as well at work for foundations and other types of organizations. They don't have the time or the desire to parse their way through and try to find the things that they're looking for that are in the wrong place and so on. So I think that's absolutely critical. Follow the directions. You don't want your proposal on the cutting room floor, that's for sure. So these are just suggestions for your letter proposal. I've got 9 topics to include in your letter, and how you organize them will be based on the information that you already have. So, you need to know the person's name. You try to be personal in this situation, address the letter to them. And this is short, like it's back to back, 1 page, no longer than that, or you're getting into too much information. The first couple of sentences, thanking them for the opportunity, providing an overview of your firm and your mission statement or your values. Mention similar work you've done for clients, or if you're a new consultant, similar work that you've done in another situation, like, for example, when you were working on your thesis. And the first paragraph then summarize your special skills and experience. Then there's a study overview, which is a 1-paragraph description of the study, purpose, objectives, and planned methodology. Now you write it out and then try to make the language friendly and not too technical. This is a friendly letter as opposed to an extremely technical one. So I would suggest you write and rewrite and edit until you get it into a shape that you feel is very positive. Then provide a task analysis. I always found in the past that a quick chart, which I did up on Excel and then just zipped it into the letter as, 3 or 4 lines, a little insert, perhaps worked best. Or you might want to do a small Gantt chart, something like that. A team description, then if you have a couple of people working with you, just 1 or 2 sentences on each, because you can attach their short CV. So you don't need to go into a lot of detail. A budget summary. Again, this is something that I started doing, was what we always say, do the budget first. And so I would do the budget and get a nice little summary of the budget on the front page of the workbook, and then minimize that and include that in the actual letter. Pricing and invoicing. Mention the total price, any tax considerations, and invoicing. For me, one thing for sure was that I needed regular income, and I could not wait for 6 months or a year until the project was over to be paid. And so I instituted status reports on a monthly basis for all my projects. And I would say in all cases, I was able to persuade clients to, work with me and to accept monthly invoices. Now, this may not be true in some government departments, but generally speaking, clients became very happy to get a status report every month, because then they could report to their superiors about how the project was going. And then finally, a thank you with your contact information and signature. So those are the 9 key topics for your letter proposal. And then I have 13 topics for your formal proposal. So, and again, don't organize it this way, organize it the way they want. But usually there's a cover letter, and I suggest you write this last. It's like the introduction when you're writing an essay, but you do it last so that you cover all the key points. Include your track record and accomplishments and proposal highlights and why you're interested in this study. You have to distinguish yourself from everybody else who may also be submitting. So what is the one thing about you and your firm that, make it a great idea to hire you? Now, at the same time, you don't want to be self-serving. You don't want to be puffed up promoting yourself in a way that is offensive to the client. Some people, take offense to that sort of thing. So you have to be always humble and enthusiastic. I know you are anyway. So then the front pages would be the title page. Sometimes there's an executive summary that's required. List the proposal criteria if they're available, and page numbers. So you could include a chart. Now think you're submitting a 30 to 40 page document at a minimum. And so they're going to be flipping through trying to find what they want. And you can help them by having this chart at the beginning, which shows exactly which page what they're looking for is on. And that's very helpful. Then your introduction, and so on, the study purpose, theory, and objectives. I don't need to tell you about that. You know about it. You can read that over later. Your corporate background, again, your management structure, for example, your qualifications, relevant studies. And an important part is your approach to working with clients. And I would say also your values here. They want to work with somebody who aligns with their values as well. And if you have a website, of course, you can provide more information, who's on the study team in decreasing order of responsibility and information about them. Study methodology. This is a critical section, of course, and where you will have put your most thought. Now, a number of these earlier topics, corporate background in particular, introduction and cover letter and so on, I think Vanessa and Claire are going to talk about ways to use AI to help you, or ways to store this information so you can reuse it over and over, and you don't have to start at square one every single time, because some of the stuff is repetitive. But just to say that when you're putting a budget together, what you're doing first, you're giving a lot of thought to the methodology and a lot of detail into how you would actually go about it. And if you have done other studies, you can be going back to them and looking at how successful you were with particular methods and how much time they took the last time. For example, case studies. Oh, I had to do a case study in Winnipeg and I had to do one in Vancouver. And how much, what were the costs in terms of, travel time and staying in hotels and all the various associated bits and pieces related to traveling, and then how long did the interviews take, and then there's the transcription, and so you walk through the whole process. But in the methodology section, you don't provide financial information. You have it in your budget, but that's to be held until you present the budget. Task schedule, use something visual, some kind of a timeline, makes a big difference. What the deliverables are. And then there could be value added deliverables, which makes your proposal even more attractive. And references, be sure to phone or email your references and request that it's okay to use their name. Now, this is good on two fronts. Number one, it apprises them of what's going on in case they suddenly get a call from the federal government. They won't be surprised and they'll have had a chance to think about you before then. The other is it's a marketing tool to remind somebody you exist and say, oh, and I'm doing a proposal for such and such an organization or department, and I wanted to use your name. It can be kind of refreshing them about the great work that you've already done for them. So be sure to do it. And then there's a budget. So only include the summary sheet or whatever their budget format is. Be sure to use their costs if they suggest per diems for travel and food and whatnot, having worked it out in advance. And only includes the items that are identified in the RFP, any taxes and so on. Schedule of payments, what your expectations are in terms of being paid. That's a whole other webinar. We can go there another time about actually getting paid, but be very clear about what your expectations are. And that, in my case, I said I was always going to submit a monthly invoice and a status report and so on, so they had something in hand that was a value-added part of the study. Then your CVs. Very brief, maximum 4 pages. Include projects relevant to the study or notable in some particular way. Any professional designations and volunteer experience. And that is the template.
So I'll just, the one thing I'll add was around using AI again to help with this part of the proposal writing process. So I've just got, a prompt up there. Draft a proposal outline for this RFP that aligns with the RFP requirements. So again, you've given your AI tool the RFP so it can, and directed it to, use that information. And it often can help you, sketch out what, because sometimes RFPs have very specific requirements, like Gail was saying about the headings have to be, sections have to be called this, they have to be in this order, they have to be numbered like this or whatever. So this is where you can use AI to help you with some of that administrative work and ask it to put in kind of the key points or the requirements that should be included in each section. And that can help you, create the outline or the structure for the proposal that you're going to write. So I think that's it. I'll turn it back over to you, Vanessa.
Terrific, thank you. Claire, because we do have a couple of minutes before we go to the Q&A, and I just wanted to check, did you have time to talk, and if you did, my apologies, did you have time to talk about if you decide not to propose?
I knew I was short on time, so I skipped over that, but I'm happy to go back to it.
I think it's really important, actually. And I appreciate that you added that section to your presentation. So I'd love to hear you talk about it, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. So I quickly skipped over this slide in the interest of time, but when I was talking about whether or not you decide to proceed with a proposal, even if you decide not to proceed, this can still be a good business building opportunity. So, again, if it's a client that you know or have worked with before, you have the opportunity to go back to them and sometimes give a little bit of polite education or explanation about why you're not bidding. Maybe it's that there's no budget. Maybe there's some issues around the methods or the timeline that you've seen. And sometimes, whether or not you have a relationship with them already, a potential client will be open to saying, okay, well, actually, we are open to changing that, or you make a good point, and here is the budget. Or, you never know how that conversation is going to go. Of course, you need to be, polite about it, but it's always good to give a little bit of education because sometimes people put out RFPs and they genuinely don't really know what they're looking for. They have an idea, but it's maybe not the right fit for what they're hoping to accomplish. And, the other thing that you can do is connect them to someone else or refer them to someone else. So, maybe you don't have the interest or the capacity or whatever to do the work or the expertise, but you have a colleague that could do it, or someone, another consultant that has great expertise in that area. Referrals, going way back to the beginning of this session where Gail talked about referrals, referrals are a great way for all of us to generate business. And if you're not going to do the work, you might as well refer to, someone else who can. And sometimes clients, when you politely decline and kind of give the reasons for your decline, sometimes clients will come back to you and say, well, listen, we really want to work with you. And, we've made XYZ changes because of that. So you never know how that's going to go, but it is helpful to always just go back if you have that opportunity. So I'll stop sharing, and I know we had a couple of questions